Imagine this. You are surrounded by the sepulchral silence of the taiga, and it is 40 degrees below zero. It is so cold that the air burns your lungs as you breathe, and the tree trunks explode with a sound like cannon fire. In your hands, you hold a still warm hare, the only thing you will eat in 3 days, but right now, its blood dripping onto the snow is your death sentence. You have exactly 15 minutes before the one who should not have woken up appears from within the bluish mist. At 40 below zero, the rules of the game change. Normally, the bear sleeps in its den, but if it is on its feet, you have a shatun in front of you. It is not just a predator, it is a biological machine in a mode of total destruction. A bear becomes a shatun if it did not accumulate fat in the autumn, if it was woken up, or if it is sick. It has nothing to lose. Its organism works at the limit, burning its last resources so as not to become a block of ice. Such a beast lives in winter for barely 2 or 4 weeks, but in that time, it ravages everything living in a territory of 30 kilometers. To it, you are not a man. You are the only way to hold on until dawn. In the freezing air, the steam of fresh blood works like a thermal elevator, lifting scent molecules and scattering them over dozens of kilometers. The shatun detects it instantly. Why does it ignore fear and attack even a group? How does it calculate your position in the gloom when you are almost blind? And most importantly, why will the taiga become your tomb if you do not disappear from the hunting ground in 15 minutes? Right now, among the black trunks, the shatun has already taken its first step toward you. But our ancestors had a secret that allowed them to deceive even this demon. The fact that the shatun is already following your trail turns the forest into a time bomb. And here the question arises. Why did the ancient Slavs, living side by side with enormous moose of 300 kilograms, usually spend their strength on catching a simple hare of 2 kilograms? At first glance, it seems like total stupidity. The moose is a reserve of fat and meat for an entire week for the whole family, and the hare is, well, 1 bite for a single time. But here the harsh physics of cooling comes into play, which our ancestors understood by pure instinct. Let us compare these two objects from an engineer's point of view. The hare is like a small battery. As soon as you hunt it, it freezes to the bone in 10 minutes. Its thin legs and small body allow the cold to extinguish that energy source instantly. The blood stain on the snow is minuscule, and in a quarter of an hour, the body no longer smells of anything nor gives off heat. You simply throw it in the bag and disappear. For the shatun prowling a couple of kilometers away, that signal goes out before it has time to turn its snout toward you. Now look at the moose. It is a massive biological reactor. Even when it is 40 degrees below zero outside, its body will not become a block of ice in a second. Outside, the skin and hair will freeze quickly. But inside, under a thick layer of muscle and fat, the hot core will continue to give off heat for another 3 or 5 hours. In the freezing dry air, that steam and living heat turn the moose into a gigantic thermal lighthouse. For a hungry shatun, that looks like an enormous neon sign that says, "Food here," and glows through the brush for dozens of kilometers. Butchering such a mass is not a stroll. It is an exhausting industrial process. You alone will take at least 2 hours with hot blood up to your elbows, which gives off steam and alerts everyone in the surroundings of your lunch. While you handle the knife, you are tied to that spot. You become a hostage of your own trophy, becoming for the bear a prey as appetizing as that same moose. That is why the key survival technology was snare traps. It was like a passive income in the world of hunting. The snare kills the animal at night when the man is not near. By the time you go to check the trap at dawn, the cold has already done the main work for you. It will have completely frozen the blood and the prey itself. Frozen meat does not smell or emit heat. You simply take the cold load and leave, being totally invisible to the master of the forest. But small game will never give the amount of fuel a large clan needs, not to turn into ice inside a cabin buried by snow. And when the life of the entire community was at stake, the Slavs had to switch to collective warfare technologies. This collective warfare began with the artel. To be clear, an artel is not just a group of guys together, but a well-oiled team where everyone has their role. Going alone for a moose of 400 kilograms in this cold is a fast way to commit suicide. While you mess with the piece, you yourself become the hot dish for the shatun. That is why the Slavs went out in groups of 5 or 7. Here there was no room for heroics, only pure calculation. If one person messes up, the whole team falls. The first thing was to extinguish your smell. For a beast, a human stinks for kilometers. Sweat, fat, living heat. But our ancestors had their trick. They did not bathe for weeks, and that layer of natural fat on the skin worked like a hermetic cover that enclosed body odor. Furthermore, their tan skin jackets had spent years soaking up the thick smoke from bonfires and ash. Soot and ash are a brutal chemical filter. The alkali in the ash kills bacteria and eats the smell of sweat completely, making the hunter seem like a simple burnt log to the forest. The artel always approached the target against the wind. That killed 2 birds with 1 stone. The smell went toward the empty taiga, and the noise of the steppes was camouflaged with the howl of the freezing wind. The key tool in this combat was the rogatina. It is a heavy spear reinforced with a steel crossbar. Imagine it as a stop or a break. Why not a bow? At 40 below zero, the string becomes rigid and can snap, and an arrow does not stop a mass of 400 kilograms. When the artel surrounds the moose, 5 men strike at once under the shoulder blade. That is the off switch. The blow goes straight to the heart and lungs. The crossbar is a matter of life or death. It does not let the blade sink too deep. Thanks to that stop, the furious beast does not throw itself on you with all its weight. The steel hits the ribs and keeps the animal at bay. Thus, you prevent the moose from reaching you with a hoof in its last shakes when it deals kicks to the air out of pure rage. The strike was always simultaneous. The spears pierced the rib cage, and by puncturing both lungs instantly, the moose went out in only 30 or 40 seconds. It does not even have time to let out a loud groan that would attract a predator. As soon as the beast falls, the countdown begins. The team has only 7 minutes before the dense steam from the hot meat rises above the trees like a thermal signal for the shatun. No one wastes time butchering carefully. They cut the meat crudely into large pieces, and each hunter grabs his own. The blood on the snow is quickly covered with fresh snow to freeze the smell and hide the kill site. A second later, only an immaculate white field remains, and the group has already vanished into the bluish gloom. Once the load is distributed on the back, your worst enemy is the clock. In winter in Siberia, the sun works a laughable schedule. It comes out at 9 in the morning, and by 3 in the afternoon, it already leaves you in total darkness. You have only 6 hours to act. The other 18 are a black wall where man is totally vulnerable. The shatun is a nocturnal hunter. While you stumble over every root, its pupils are at their limit, catching any contrast or movement. It does not see you like a thermal camera, but it perfectly hears your heavy breathing and the rustle of your clothes. In this deathly silence, any extra movement is noise, and noise in the night is an invitation to dinner. The ancestors had a golden rule. If nightfall catches you in the forest, forget about going home. You have to become a stone. Any attempt to go through the brush makes you an easy target. The bear will spot you by the crunch of the snow from hundreds of meters away. To avoid ending up as an ice statue, hunters used the snow burrow technique. They did not throw 4 branches on top. They literally buried themselves in a good mound of snow. The physics is simple. Snow is a perfect insulator composed of 90% air that traps heat. Inside that shelter, the temperature stays around 0 degrees thanks to your own breath. But to avoid getting soaked with condensation, they made a small hole in the roof for ventilation and put a thick layer of fir branches under the body. That is your drainage. It prevents body heat from melting the snow under you. Here came the dilemma of fire. A normal bonfire at night is a giant lighthouse that alerts for kilometers. That is why fire was lit only in extreme cases. It was a tiny light hidden behind a high snow wall that acted as a reflector. It prevented the light from spreading through the forest and directed all the heat only toward the human. To avoid falling asleep and being caught by the beast, they stuck a thin and long branch in the snow that pointed outward. If the predator stepped on the snow mound, the branch vibrated. That was your only silent alarm clock. The best way to reach dawn is to stay still as a post. Hunters waited for the key moment between 4 and 6 in the morning. That is when the cold gets meanest, and even the shatun gets exhausted and goes into deep ravines to save energy before the sun comes out. Exactly in those hours before dawn, the Slavs went for water, but they did not break the ice with axes. That roar would be like a gong for the bear. They used bershi, wicker traps set beforehand, that they pulled from under the ice in a heartbeat. Fish was the perfect fuel. It did not smell of blood throughout the forest and gave clean energy. But not even that saved you from another slow death that took your strength drop by drop. The thing is that you cannot last long based only on protein and fat. If you only put meat into the body, your biological structure begins to crumble from the inside. It is a silent breakdown called scurvy. First, the gums become soft like wet moss. Then your teeth move, and old scars from last summer suddenly open and begin to bleed. The body stops making the glue that holds tissues together. To avoid falling to pieces at 40 below zero, the Slavs looked for supplements in the diet where a city dweller would only see dry sticks. The star resource is the alburnum. It is the thin, clear layer between the coarse bark and the hardwood of the poplar or willow. Basically, they are the veins of the tree through which sugar and nutrients run. They scraped it with knives and pounded it into flour. It tastes like bitter cardboard, but in the poplar bark there is a natural substitute for aspirin. It was not just a source of vitamin C, but a real medicine chest that lowered the fever and relieved joint pain from the constant cold. Another secret store of energy is the roots of the cattail. This plant peeks out from the ice on the riverbanks. In its rhizomes, an enormous amount of starch is hidden, that same slow fuel that is not found in meat. To this, they added frozen berries. Red and sour cranberries under the snow become ice capsules full of acid. To get a handful of these vitamins, you had to remember with precision where the bushes grew in summer and dig through a layer of snow a meter deep. That gathering in a forest where a shatun prowls was like a reconnaissance group's outing. Usually, women and adolescents were in charge of this. They worked strictly in groups of 3 or 4 people. While one, on their knees, dug through the snow mound or peeled a tree, the others stood back to back and listened to the silence. In the freezing air, any suspicious crack of a branch is heard from hundreds of meters away, as long as you yourself do not make noise. It was exhausting work. At the slightest sign of danger, the group vanished instantly into the thicket without engaging in combat. In the forest, when the cold tries to dry you to the bones, the biggest trap is the snow. It might seem that there are mountains of water around, but if you simply start to melt it and drink it, you risk killing yourself faster than a predator would. Snow is absolutely empty water in which there is not a gram of salts or minerals. Your body works with electrical impulses, and they need chemistry. If you gorge yourself on drinking that distillate, your internal wiring will begin to short-circuit, you will get muscle cramps, and your heart could simply lose its rhythm. To ensure the body did not fail at the most critical moment, the ancestors used their tricks. Hunters knew that melting snow was a waste of firewood and time. Dense ice from the deepest part of the river gives twice as much water and also preserves the mineral base that the organism needs. But the most powerful drink in the taiga is fresh blood. To get the daily dose of salts of 300 milliliters, you had to hunt at least 3 hares. It is a natural cocktail of moisture and electrolytes that is absorbed instantly and does not drain the resources from your bones. If there was no hunt, they threw a pinch of birch ash into the cauldron with water. Its minerals turned the dead meltwater into a living solution that returned strength to the body. But thirst is only half the problem. The second fatal mistake is finding a free lunch. If you come across the corpse of a deer or a moose in the forest that is intact, do not be glad. In winter, it is not a gift of fate, but the personal refrigerator of a shatun. This beast never abandons its food. It covers it with branches and guards it with extreme rage. To it, that store is the only chance to reach spring alive, and it will tear anyone apart just for the smell of their presence nearby. If you see carrion, stay away, taking a detour of at least 100 meters without even slowing down. How to know you have entered someone else's kitchen before they crush you? The first sign is the black reconnaissance in the sky. If crows are flying and screaming over the site, it is a signal for the predator. The bear understands that scream perfectly and always goes toward it to check its prey. The second marker is the height marks. The shatun stands on its hind legs and tears off the bark, showing its size. If you see deep grooves at a height of 2.5 meters, be sure of it. A 300-kilogram master is prowling here. The third sign is the piles of excrement full of bone fragments. That means the bear has firmly installed itself at that spot and will fight for its store until the end. You have to read these signals instantly. Otherwise, you yourself will go from being the hunter to being part of that same refrigerator. But even if you have found the right water and have bypassed all the predator's limits, the main problem has only just begun. You cannot simply take that mountain of meat to your home. The smell of blood and fat would turn your house into a death trap for the whole family. At 40 below zero, any dwelling is a fortress only for people, but not for food. If you have brought the body of a moose directly into the cabin, you have made a technical error that turns your house into an enormous feeder. The smell of fat and fresh blood spreads through the frozen forest like a powerful radio beacon signal, and the logs of your walls are just a thin wrapping for a hungry beast that it will open in 10 minutes. To avoid bringing death to their children's doors, the Slavs use the technology of the laybas. It is your personal safe on a cushion of air, raised to a height of 4 or 5 meters. But the main engineering trick lay in its support. The laybas was not simply placed on a pole, it was wedged between 3 living trees. The bear is an excellent climber, but it is too heavy. When it tries to climb to such a storehouse, the thin trunks under its weight begin to vibrate and sway in different directions. It is a trap for its vestibular system. The beast cannot fix its center of gravity on supports that dance, and it falls to the ground from 5 meters high. The second critical factor is distance. The laybas was always built 300 or 500 meters from the inhabited cabin. Additionally, the location was chosen strictly downwind. The wind must carry the scent of the prey into the depths of the forest, far from the place where you sleep. If the shatun comes for the aroma, it will encounter an inaccessible tower on the outskirts, and not a wall behind which the voices of children are heard. While the bear is distracted by the swaying trees, you will have a time advantage. The meat itself was frozen whole in enormous carcasses. It was never cut beforehand, because every new cut is a new emission of scent into the freezing air. Butchering was done only in small portions, just before cooking. Maintaining the cleanliness of the site was, in that case, a matter of life or death. All traces after the hunt, such as bones and viscera, were taken 1 or 2 kilometers from the camp. Those remains were thrown into the deepest ravines or sunk in the river under the ice to completely break any chemical trail. Even when the food is well hidden, smoke can give you away. In the winter taiga, the smell of burning resin is a signal that screams, "A human is here." Therefore, the cabin was heated with a soft fire, using only birch bark or dry birch wood. Birch bark has a neutral smell that disperses quickly and does not smell like a dwelling to a predator. It was a mode of total invisibility. While the beast looked for resources where unstable trees awaited it, the people recovered their strength peacefully. All of this worked as long as the rules were respected. But there was a hunter who decided he was faster than the laws of physics and that he would take a chance to see what happened. It all started when an expert trapper decided to steal 30 extra minutes from the taiga. It was near 3 in the afternoon, that critical mark when the sun in Siberia begins to plummet behind the horizon. According to all the rules, that is the moment of a total stop. Either you are already in the cabin, or you are in a deep shelter. But before him, he had a male of 400 kilograms. The hunter took it down when the forest was already beginning to fill with the gloom at his side, committing his first technical error, starting the butchering in the darkness. As soon as the knife opened the skin, a dense column of steam rose from the body. In the freezing air, this thermal signal travels for kilometers, functioning as a chemical marker for any predator in the area. His dog, which normally feared not even the wolf, suddenly slumped and began to press itself into the snow. 10 meters from the kill, on the fresh snow, the hunter saw a footprint. It was a paw 30 centimeters wide. The mark was so recent that the edges had not yet crystallized from the cold. The shatun had not only passed through there, it was right there just a couple of minutes ago, observing from the thick shadow. In that situation, only one opportunity remained. Leave everything and get out. But the hunter committed the second error, this time psychological. He looked at the mountain of meat, thought of his effort, and decided, "One more minute, I am almost finished." Those 5 minutes were the last of his story. When he heard the crack of a branch, it was already too late. The shatun does not let out a warning roar before jumping. It acts as a heavy and absolutely silent projectile. 3 days later, the group found the place. The hunter's body was 50 meters from the animal. The dog was in pieces. He received the first blow. But the most terrifying thing is that the beast did not even touch the moose. It did not eat even a bite of the prey for which the man had gambled. From a biological point of view, there is no mystery. For a shatun surviving at the limit of its resources, the hunter was not food, but competition. The bear did not go to rob the storehouse, it went to clear its territory. In its logic, there cannot be another active predator in its area claiming its calories. It eliminated the threat, demonstrated its strength, and returned to the darkness. The man simply did not take into account that in the winter forest he is not the top of the food chain, but a leftover link that nature recycles without warning. To survive in the taiga, the Slavs turned every step into a steel algorithm. At 40 below zero, survival was a job with a strict schedule where the primary resource was time. Everything started with rigid timing. The team had exactly 6 hours of light per day. The window of opportunity opened at 9 in the morning and closed at 3 in the afternoon. Even fishing was a biological calculation. The interval from 4 to 6 in the morning allowed occupying the riverbank right when the shatun usually retreated to rest in the deep ravines. It was the way to dodge the predator without ever crossing paths. The hunt of a 400-kilogram beast was never the feat of a man alone. It was the work of a mechanism of 7 people. While 2 fixed the target, the others delivered a dull and simultaneous blow with spears just under the shoulder blade. The heart and lungs of the moose shut down in only 30 seconds, leaving no time for a noisy agony that could attract other predators for kilometers around. Right after, the extreme marathon of butchering began. The people had only 6 or 7 minutes to take the valuable meat and disappear. The physics is simple. While the body is warm, it emits a powerful aromatic signal through the steam, functioning as a thermal lighthouse. One had to leave before that signal gathered guests at the spot. The camouflage was absolute. They smoked their clothes with thick smoke and rubbed the fabric with dry birch ash. The ash neutralized the smell of sweat, making the hunter smell to the forest like burnt wood and not like living food. The approach to any target was made strictly against the wind so as not to send the biological trail toward the predator. The logistics of storage completed this safety cycle. The storehouse raised 5 meters high between 3 trees was the final point of the route. It was always placed 500 meters from the cabin downwind. The wind acted as an engineering filter, carrying the smell of the frozen meat away from the dwelling and breaking the chemical link between the prey and the family. If the darkness caught you on the way, the protocol demanded a total stop. 18 hours in a snow burrow without a single extra movement, that was the price for living. You had to literally be part of the snow mound, while above you in the night the shatun prowled. Reading its marks from the 30-centimeter paw to the signs on the bark at more than 2 meters was not an observation. It was an order for immediate retreat. The golden rule of the system said, "Meat is never worth a life." At the first sign that the bear was near, the group left everything. It was not the hungriest who survived, but the one who knew when to retreat in time. History tends to sing to the brave, but the Siberian winter only remembers the intelligent. Those who survived here for centuries did not seek glory. They sought a way to fit into the rigid regulations of nature, where any error is the end. They understood that the taiga does not punish the weak, but the greedy and the careless. Surviving in these conditions is not a heroic feat. It is a cold job based on facts. Those who came out ahead were those who knew how to put away their ego. They chose the hare if they were alone, and only went for the moose if they were part of an ardil. Those who dispatched the beast in 30 seconds without letting the agony attract the attention of the one who shouldn't. They understood the chemistry of all this. They knew that clean snow is poison that steals salts from the heart. Therefore, they either drank fresh blood as a natural cocktail of vitamins and electrolytes, or revived the meltwater with a pinch of birch ash to return the necessary minerals to it. These people did not try to dominate the forest. They turned what they knew of biology into their only shield. If the protocol demanded staying still in a snow burrow for 18 hours, they turned to stone. If a 30-centimeter footprint or a sepulchral silence in the thicket said "get out," they left the mountain of meat behind and vanished. In the winter taiga, victory is not the amount of prey, but the opportunity to return to your family and see tomorrow's dawn. They survived not by being stronger than the predator, but because they learned to think faster than it. They created a system of rules that allowed man, the weakest creature of the winter forest, to remain invisible to death.